This is the Bullhorn, Monday, June 9th. Markets nudged higher as the world watched London. US and Chinese officials are back at the table. And while no breakthroughs are expected, investors are hoping for just enough progress to keep tariffs on hold. The S&P 500 closed up 0.1%, the Nasdaq rose 0.3%, and the Dow finished flat. But with the S&P above 6,000 and the Nasdaq nearing 20,000, the mood remains confident, for now. Tesla jumped over 4%, continuing its rebound after last week's public spat between Elon Musk and President Trump. Amazon and Alphabet gained around 1.6%, while Microsoft and Nvidia posted smaller gains. Apple bucked the trend, slipping over 1% after its developer conference underwhelmed. Meta and Broadcom also declined. Chip stocks rallied sharply on hopes of easing export restrictions to China. The semiconductor ETF rose 2%, with AMD, ON Semi, and ARM holdings all climbing more than 4%. In other movers, Robinhood and AppLovin both fell after being passed over for S&P 500 inclusion. Warner Bros. Discovery gave up early gains, closing down 3% despite plans to split into two listed companies. Circle, the USDC stablecoin issuer, climbed 7% after its IPO, and crypto-related names followed suit. Bitcoin surged past $110,000, lifting Coinbase and MicroStrategy. Oil extended its run, with WTI crude up 1.2% to $65.40 a barrel, the highest since early April. Treasury yields dipped, the 10-year falling to 4.48%. The US dollar edged lower against major peers. In London, the FTSE 100 dipped slightly, but the FTSE 250 advanced 0.6%. Sterling ticked up 0.17% against the dollar. Investors in the UK and Europe are watching two stories: trade and China. China's economic data was soft. Exports missed expectations, prices are falling, and the country is still grappling with weak demand and industrial deflation. Consumer prices in China fell 0.1% year-on-year in May. Producer prices dropped 3.3%, the worst reading since July 2023. Meanwhile, exports to the U.S. plunged 34.5%, the steepest drop in over 5 years. Imports also shrank by 3.4%. But there are hopes Beijing may step up stimulus in response. Markets across Asia mostly rose on Monday. Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained over 1.6%, and Japan's Nikkei rose 0.9% as tech and chip stocks led the way. SoftBank and Advantest were among the top performers. South Korea surged nearly 1.8%, driven by a massive rebound in cacao stocks. China's main indices also rose modestly despite the soft data. Buoyed by optimism over talks with the U.S., Australian markets were closed for the King's birthday holiday, while New Zealand dipped slightly. Brent crude held steady near $66.40 a barrel. The dollar lost ground across Asia, falling against the yen, Aussie, and Kiwi. Back in London, M&A was the driver. Spectris soared over 63% after a takeover approach from Advent International. Alphawave jumped 22% on news of a $2.4 billion acquisition by Qualcomm. M&G rose on an upgrade from UBS. On the downside, WPP dropped after CEO Mark Reed announced his departure. Dunelm fell nearly 4% on a downgrade, and Trustpilot tumbled nearly 6% after a new sell rating. Aviva also slipped after being downgraded by KBW. In Europe, the Stoxx 600 dipped 0.07%, snapping a 4-day rally. Madrid's IBEX was the only major index to finish in the green. And finally, in Japan, revised GDP figures showed the economy shrank by just 0.2% in the first quarter, less than expected. The Bank of Japan meets next week to review its policy stance. The focus now turns to U.S. inflation data, due later this week, and the outcome of the London trade talks. For markets riding high, the question is whether the calm holds. This is the Bullhorn. Loud, clear, market ready. We'll be back tomorrow. Subscribe and stay